Okay, and how do you respond to Ambassador Foley's claim, shared by all the people who signed the memo, that the ban is a betrayal of American values?
The ambassador is certainly entitled to his opinion on that. There are many, obviously it's very clear that this policy has many opponents, but fundamentally it's designed to try to keep the United States safe.
All right, so that short clip you just saw was only a preview of what we're about to dive into. The full video shows a congressional hearing where Ilhan Omar is questioning Mr. Edward Ramatowski from the United States Department of State *, and honestly, what you're about to watch is a real lesson in handling tough political pressure. Ramatowski is a career public servant who has spent more than 30 years at the State Department. He isn't a politician, he's a professional diplomat. Yet during this hearing, he's being questioned in a way that clearly tries to put him on the spot. Representative Omar appears to be pushing him to criticize his own department, his colleagues, or even the president. But he stays composed and doesn't take the bait. We're going to watch the entire exchange together. As you do, pay close attention to how he answers the questions, not just what he says. He focuses on explaining legal procedures and how policy is implemented, while Omar tries to steer the conversation toward a political gotcha moment using second-hand statements and quotes from officials who have resigned. This type of detailed political back and forth is exactly the kind of exchange I enjoy analyzing. So as we go through the video, let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you think he handled the political pressure effectively? And if you enjoy this kind of ** straightforward political analysis, be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps support the content. Alright, let's jump into the full video.
Department for 33 years, right?
Over 33 years, yes.
Yeah, wonderful. Has it been typical for more than 100 people to sign dissent memos on a given policy?
That would be atypical, I think.
Atypical. Has it been typical for policy to drive several SOs to publicly resign in protest?
There have been Foreign Service officers who've resigned in the past over various policies. That's true.
In June of 2017, between the second and the third version of the Muslim ban, more than 100 diplomats signed a dissent memo that said, quote, banning travelers from these 7 countries calls back to some of the worst times in our history. Former consular officer Christopher Richards, who resigned in protest of the Muslim ban, said in an op-ed that the consular officers were not able to issue waivers on their own, that they had to get approval from the State Department. Would that be you? Do you give that approval?
No, that's not correct. The consular officers make the decision on the first 2 prongs of the waiver, national interest and undue hardship, and then the interagency security review provides the guidance on the security prong.
So that's not a decision you get to make,
no.
Or is the White House involved in that decision?
Not at all.
Okay. Sarah Gartner, another former FSO who resigned in protest over the Muslim ban, told CNN that fellow officers, quote, felt pressure to approve as few folks as possible for the waiver. She also said that the Muslim ban had been, quote, reworked and sanitized by layers of bureaucracy with people distracted by the next terrible thing. It can be easy to forget it's even happening. Well, it looks like Congress hasn't forgotten. And Madam Chair, I have assigned testimony from 4 former FSOs that I would like to enter into record.
It's put into the record by unanimous consent.
Thank you. Ambassador John Foley, who quit his post as ambassador to Panama in 2018, said he could no longer represent President Trump and still hold true to the value that make this country great. Among the policies he listed was the Muslim ban. In the end, how many diplomats and consular officers signed the dissent memo protesting the ban?
I don't have an exact number for you, Congresswoman. I know that some did.
Mm-hmm. Will you be able to get us that number?
I can't guess that number, no.
How do you respond to his claim that the consular officers have to get clear waivers with your office?
I would say, as I said before, that that's not correct. The consular officers make the determination on the first two prongs of the waiver, national interest and undue hardship, and the security check, as I testified, is conducted back here in Washington. Now, if a consular officer is...
So you're saying his claim is false?
Which claim? That Washington is making the decisions?
Yes.
Yes, that's not correct.
And how do you respond to Ms. Gartner's claim that the officers are implicitly or explicitly pressured to deny waivers?
We are not implicitly or explicitly pressuring anyone to act in any way contrary to the law.
Okay. And how do you respond to Ambassador Foley's claim, shared by all the people who signed the memo, that the ban is a betrayal of American values?
The ambassador is certainly entitled to his opinion on that. There are many, obviously it's very clear that this policy has many opponents, but fundamentally it's designed to try to keep the United States safe.
And to our other two panelists, was Stephen Miller's role in formulating the three reiterations of the Muslim ban? What was his role?
I'm not aware of any role played by Stephen Miller.
And Ms. Newman?
I was not at the department in January. I did not start until late February.
Okay. And what instructions were DHS and state given from the White House as how to implement the Muslim ban?
I wasn't given any instruction from the White House.
Again, ma'am, I was not at the department in January 2017.
All right, let's skip the play-by-play and move straight into the analysis, because what we just watched was essentially a political ambush where the target refused to go down. The entire exchange was a clear contrast between *** professional composure and political theater. First, let's talk about the setup. Ilhan Omar came into the hearing fully prepared with quotes, talking points, and a narrative already in place. The goal didn't appear to be gathering new information. It was about creating a moment. Her argument leaned heavily on hearsay, referencing statements from people who had resigned. She cited comments from former Foreign Service officer Christopher Richards and another former officer, Sarah Gardner, who claimed they felt pressure during the process. That's a familiar political tactic. People who left the job make claims, and the person still in the role is asked to answer for them. But Edward Ramatowski, a veteran diplomat from the United States Department of State addressed those claims step by step. First, the waiver process. This was presented as the gotcha moment. The claim was that officers weren't able to issue waivers and that Ramatowski himself was the bottleneck. His response was calm and direct. No, that's not correct. He didn't raise his voice or get defensive. Instead, he clarified the process on the record in front of Congress. According to him, officers are indeed involved in making those decisions. By explaining the procedure clearly, he challenged the underlying premise of the question. Second, the allegation of pressure. Representative Omar referenced claims that an officer felt pressured. That kind of statement can be difficult to address because it's based on personal perception rather than documented action. Ramatowski avoided arguing over one individual's feelings and instead responded with a firm policy statement that the department does not implicitly or explicitly pressure officers to act against the law. By focusing on official policy and procedures, he reframed the conversation away from subjective claims. Finally, the American values question. This was the moment that could have produced a headline. The question was framed in a way that could push him into either agreeing with a criticism of the policy or appearing insensitive. Rather than engaging in that framing, he acknowledged that different officials may hold different opinions and then returned the discussion to the policy's stated purpose, which he described as being designed to protect the security of the United States. Throughout the exchange, Ramatowski stayed in the lane of policy implementation and legal process. He approached the conversation as a career public servant explaining procedures rather than as someone participating in political debate. In contrast, the questioning focused more on building a broader narrative about the policy. In the end, The moment illustrated a familiar dynamic in congressional hearings, a tension between *** political messaging and technical policy explanations ***. One side aimed to highlight concerns and criticisms, while the other focused on explaining how the policy works within the department's procedures. Whether viewers see the exchange as effective oversight, political theater, or a mix of both often depends on their own perspective, but it certainly showed how experienced officials sometimes handle intense questioning by staying strictly focused on process and facts.